Hello and welcome to this Vietnamese Literature Project brought to you by International Studies Department. To find out more, visit our website at http://quốc tế học quoctehoc.wordpress.com.
International Study Department present In the Golden Sun by Dương Thụy. The unexpected appearance. It appears as though it wasn't as easy as I thought to truly understand Jean's position. I asked a few people, and even asked Madame Barrow's secretary, but it seems that everyone answered my question with another question. Did he introduce himself to you? It appears that the Belgians were not as naive as I thought, for they certainly knew that Jean didn't want to tell me, so I had to probe. They weren't dumb enough to say anything, lest it wasn't alright with Jean. I began to realize that he most certainly has an extraordinary position that nobody dared to mention. The more I thought about it, the more mysterious it became, for Jean was rather young, older than me by only 3 years. So, how could he be a senior manager or someone with such important position? Jean's identity was certainly very mysterious. I didn't see Jean in his office all day, but sometimes I saw him whisper by the conference room or heard someone say he was going down to the factory or visiting the retail shops. Previously, I thought Jean's absence from the office was normal, because he was obviously a chauffeur responsible for driving all the powerful bossy around, and when he wasn't driving, he could be in charge of serving some coffee for everybody. But now that I had investigated more closely, I realized that I was wrong. Here at Van Letter, there was nobody responsible for serving tea or coffee like in the Vietnamese subsidiary. Whether they were senior level bosses or just trainees, everyone got their own drinks, photocopied their own documents, and did their own different trivial tasks. If a senior manager had a private secretary, it was likely the one who could get the tea for the boss. Though I also saw few secretaries that were willing to do so, yet almost all majestic directors would care about themselves. It must be that Western societies were so civilized that they respected human beings and didn't discriminate in regard to races. All men are equal, regardless of their social status or their different rank in the company. Since everybody was a human being, how could anyone be forced to do small menial tasks for another person that they could probably do for themselves? I also think it was partly because the cost of hiring employees were astronomically high in Europe. Employers had to pay both the employees' salaries and the very high government taxes. It seemed like in order to hire someone, it cost double their wage. Therefore, in business, there wasn't any position that wasn't really necessary, and all employees had to be given many concurrent tasks. In a lot of small restaurants, the owner had to open the doors when customers arrived, bring the menus to the customers, fetch the meals from the kitchen to serve the customer, and afterward, present the customer with the bills. When the restaurant closed, the owner also had to clean up and wash the dishes. Everybody had a lot of responsibilities. In Europe, it was rare for people to hire a live-in maid when a maid was needed. However, she could be paid by the hour, but the costs were extremely expensive, so only the wealthy could afford it. Thus, everyone had to do their own housework and cooking. I unexpectedly had a free day today because Madame Barrow and her colleague had to go out for an unplanned meeting. The meeting appeared to be very important, so they didn't let me accompany them, and all I could do was sit around in the company all day browsing the internet. I also shot back and forth in the information technology area, hoping to find Guang. It wasn't because I loved anything about the guy who was so hostile towards me just last night. It was only because when I went out to eat breakfast in the restaurant this morning, I had asked the waiter if the check last night had been added to my room bill. The one-letter company was paying for my room throughout my 2 weeks in Brussels, but I had to pay the cost for my meals, so I had been given some pocket money for that purpose. The waiter informed me that last night's bills had been paid entirely by Guang. I knew the bill was rather high, because I had purposely ordered many expensive dishes. Glancing back through the menu, I calculated that the total amount of my bill must have been over €100. Last night, I wanted to show off. I didn't realize that the amount for just one dinner was equivalent to 3 million Vietnam dong, which were enough for my family to live on for an entire month in Vietnam. €100 for a dinner was quite lavish, even for Europeans. Westerners usually ate at home and only occasionally ate out in restaurants, and if they ate at the Ibis Hotel, then the company could normally pay because that hotel catered to businessmen. I had been miserable all week and only ate packages of noodles from Vietnam. I continually boiled the water for the noodle in my room and ate there every day, and only occasionally rewarded myself with a portion of French fries that I bought out on the street, which I felt was extravagant. Now, just to show off, I had spent too much money for dinner. It seemed that I should pray every night to calm myself down. I didn't want Kwang to find me first and demand that I repay him, so I took the initiative to look for him so that I could immediately pay him back for the offensive bill. People like Kwang, who had a personality jarring enough to order a beautiful dish of vegetable soup, weren't chivalrous enough to pay for my royal dinner. He was left sitting there only because I took off, so he would not having to pay the waiter. However, it seemed like Kwang didn't go to work that day, for I shot back and forth dreamily in his working area, but didn't see a hint of him anywhere. Is the Vietnamese gentleman who sold CRM software to our one-letter group still here? I inquired of an employee in the information technology department. I had to talk with him about something. Everyone from the Smart Solutions company has already left. They completed their mission here by the end of last week, he told me. Do you mean they have returned to France? I asked, startled. His company is based in France, right? That's right. What do you need? He asked. I have to talk to him about something, for we are both fellow countrymen from Vietnam, I said awkwardly. Do you have Quan's email address? Of course I do, the information technology fellow said while searching through his drawer. Here's his business card. Quang's full name was Trần Ngọc Quang. He was actually born into a family of Vietnamese parents who had decided not to give him a Western name, whether or not they could make it difficult for him when he attended school and later in life when he went to work. Several overseas Vietnamese children related to me who was born here was given Western names, but everybody who really loved their mother country also gave their children an additional Vietnamese name. Quang's parents were also very conservative. No wonder they demand that he find a Vietnamese wife, even though he was 34 years old and still single. God, why was I beginning to believe the story he told me? Even more amazing, which almost made me holler out a bit, was that title, Founder and Director, appeared under Quang's name. He was president and chief executive officer, and the owner of the company. I didn't know how much the Smart Solutions company was worth, how much revenue it had, or how many employees there were. However, in order to sell software to the famous one-letter company. It certainly was more than mediocre. I started a conversation with Jean, my private chauffeur, since when I arrived here in Belgium, all the way back to the Ibis Hotel from the one-letter company. I asked him what he knew about Quang, how long the Smart Solutions company had been selling software to the one-letter company, and how long the Smart Solutions staff had to stay here in Brussels each time they come to maintain the software. Didn't he introduce himself to you? Jean replied. You should ask Quang more directly. After all, he is one of your fellow countrymen. Actually, I asked, confused. We are not very close to each other, but how can a person like Quang hold the position of director? Why people like him? Jean exclaimed, surprised. He is bright and competent. I thought before that Quang was Japanese, because the Japanese are naturally good at information technology. Why on earth do Japanese want to live in France? I suddenly said irritably. You are actually a Belgian, so you don't know much about the world outside. The Vietnamese recently started living all over, but the Japanese only stay in their own country. Vietnam was a former French colony, so there are many Vietnamese who have immigrated there away from their mother country. Quang was born and raised in France, so he isn't a Vietnamese at all. He is bad. A bad? Jean frowned. But why did you see him so naturally intolerable like that? Don't you know what a bat is? I asked, still angry. It is a species that is a half bird and half mouse. It doesn't have any particular root or any special characteristic. Why do you use such strong words against that Vietnamese is part? Jean asked, seeming disappointed. Isn't it because that guy is better and wealthier than the whole Vietnamese? So you're jealous? I didn't expect Jean to react that way. I remained speechless, not knowing how to answer. I thought I had gone too far, for the Belgian didn't understand anything about the inferiority complex and self-esteem issues between the Vietnamese expatriates and Vietnamese still living in Vietnam. Jean also didn't understand anything about the Vietnamese history, so there was no benefit in telling him about this matter. Fortunately, the car had arrived at the Ibis Hotel, so I discontinued the conversation with Jean. Nevertheless, I tried to salvage the conversation by saying, You have misunderstood me, for I'm not jealous of Quang about anything at all. He had the opportunity to study in Europe, and he was bright and really outstanding. However, the Vietnamese like me, who live in my own country, also aren't uneducated and dumb. Jean shrugged his shoulders and looked as though he didn't understand or pretended to be ignorant because he didn't want to understand. He waved goodbye to me and then drove off. That night, I didn't want to cut back on my supper in order to compensate for last night's meal, but my mouth was very bitter, so I didn't want to eat anything. I had not swallowed the news about Quang and the formidable position he held well. I also had not digested very well Jean's candid but inaccurate comment. I'm jealous of the Vietnamese expat. For the first time since I arrived in Belgium, I passed a sleepless night, even though I knew I may faint again the next morning.